When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject, Jeff, Part 2. User, 6AdWorldXX. Posted, May 10th, 1998.
The line reached his shoulder 2 days later. He called to say he was staying home and to tell anyone who asked that he had the flu. I went over at dusk and knocked 6 times, then went to the back and knocked on the bedroom window. He said to come in, and I did. The living room looked like someone had taken a net and thrown it over it. He had hung strips of something that looked like cheesecloth across the corners. The fabric, though, was not fabric. It was the stuff from the wound, drawn thin like sugar pulled on a hook. It caught the light and turned it the color of tea. Jeff had shaved his head. He said the hair irritated him and made his skin hurt. The lines climbed into his scalp in skinny paths. Where they met, the skin bubbled. He had a dish of warm water on the table and a bottle of peroxide and a stack of paper towels. He cleaned the big opening with a turkey baster. White things inside shifted as if they were connected. I took the baster and put it in the sink. I told him I was calling an ambulance. He said if I did, he'd lock the door and deadbolt it, and then I could stand outside and listen. He said he had it handled. And he was breathing awful fast, a little whistle at the top. His pupils were golf balls. He looked past me even when he talked, like there was something else to look at right behind my head. That night, I dreamed of bees. I woke to the ring of the phone and knew it was him before I picked up. He didn't say hello. He said, "Can you hear that?" The line hummed like before, and under it was a soft rippling sound, like dry rice pouring against paper. He said it gets loud when I'm still. He said it gets quiet when I walk. He said it is more comfortable on the tile. I drove faster than I should have. His trailer sat dark with a blue pulse behind the closed curtains. The front door was not latched, only pressed to. Inside, it was cooler than I expected, and the smell, it hit me hard, like a hand. A keening sound came from the hallway, almost too high to hear. I covered my mouth and walked straight back. Jeff was in the bathroom on the floor. He had torn down the shower curtain and laid it like a sheet and then laid himself on top of it. The big opening had widened so far that his neck had a second mouth. The threads that crossed it hardened and went glossy, and they held. He had wrapped gauze around his chest to keep it in, and the gauze fused to his skin with the same glossy stuff. He had taped his wrists to keep from scratching. His eyes were sunk and rimmed in yellow. He looked at me and smiled the way a fever smiles, proud and far away. He said he almost called earlier, said it hurts less if he doesn't move. He said they're quiet now. When he said that, something answered behind his voice. Not words, a company of dry little clicks, polite at first and then eager. The sound moved in waves through the walls and under the sink and up the frame of the mirror. He shut his eyes, his throat moved like he was swallowing air. I squatted and put my hand on his shoulder and felt heat that did not belong to a man. I told him I was carrying him to the truck. He said no, that it was too late for moving, that they did not like moving, that moving broke them, and then it hurt, and then they had to make more. He said that word, more, like he was saying the name of a person. Behind his back, something broke with a sound like a paper bag popping, and a thin cloud lifted and fell. He grabbed my wrist too hard, and his nails tore my skin, and his fingers stuck to me. The thread between us stretched and snapped like sugar glass. My skin prickled everywhere at once. Something on the tile by my shoe twitched and rolled and then anchored itself, a small white thing finding gravity. I stomped without thinking, and Jeff flinched in sympathy and said gently, "Don't do that." He looked past me when he said it. His eyes found a point on the ceiling where the paint bubbled. The bubbling swelled and seamed and then opened in a tidy circle. The stuff that came through was clear at first and then milky, like a cough that learned to walk. It ran along the crown molding and down the door frame, and when it reached my hand, it found the cut his nail had made and burned like a lemon on a cut lip. I pulled back and hit the tub and knocked over the peroxide, and the smell went through the room like breath through a harmonica. The room changed. The clicks rose and multiplied. A movement began under the shower liner, small bodies turning at once like fish. Jeff took a breath that sounded like paper crushed hard. He rolled toward me. For a second, he was my friend again. His face naked and young under the shaved scalp, his mouth set to say one more joke, and then that second collapsed. Something gathered in the opening and pushed forward, not like a thing climbing out, more like a whole room changing shape to fit through a door. He came at me, and I don't mean he crawled. I mean his arms did what arms do, and his legs did what legs do, but there was a new idea behind them, and the idea did not care about walls or my name or the photographs on his dresser. I threw my shoulder into him, and he hit the vanity. The mirror shattered. The sound made the clicks louder. He was stronger than he ought to have been. He gripped my shirt, and some of the glossy threads glued my chest to his forearm. He put his face to my face, and I saw that the whites of his eyes were full of fine cracks, a dry riverbed waiting for rain. I did not think. I grabbed the peroxide because it was there and poured it. It foamed when it hit the opening, and the foam crawled on its own as if it was happy to have work to do. Jeff screamed without sound. The threads shrank. I tore free enough to stumble backward, and he reached again, and the reaching tore something in him that kept him upright. He sagged. The slick of the floor became a skin and then a rind, and then it broke, and the breaking released a smell that made the world small. I ran. I did not stop at the door. I did not stop at the porch. I hit the steps and slid and skinned both shins. I got in my car and turned the key, and the engine hiccuped twice before it caught, and I left the gravel in a noise like bees being vacuumed. I immediately drove to the payphone by the Chevron and called 911, and then I sat on the curb and watched a newspaper spin across the lot. The deputies went in with their shirts over their mouths and came out with white around their noses. The EMTs did not go inside right away. They put on plastic covers and walked in slow. The ambulance doors stayed open a long time, and a man with a mustache asked me when I had last seen my friend. I told him. He asked if there were other chemicals in the house. I said peroxide and honey and maybe bleach under the sink. He wrote it down, but no one said the word spider, and no one said the word eggs. They kept me on the curb until the sun rose and the street got busy and the coffee at the Chevron turned over to fresh. The man with the mustache came back and told me they'd call me if they needed anything else. He used the voice you use when you don't want to lie and you don't want to tell the truth either. I went home and stood in the shower until the hot water ran out, and then I sat on the tile because I couldn't stand. When I finally looked down, I saw a line of fine dust along my forearm where his nail had scraped me, and when I rubbed it between my fingers, it felt like ground shells. I'm writing this here because I don't know what else to do with it. Jeff didn't die the way a person ought to die. He didn't live that way either. He was stubborn enough to plow through a wall if the door annoyed him. Something found that in him and used it. If you're reading this and you get bit by something and it looks wrong and it smells wrong and your body starts to make new things without asking you, don't be proud. Don't be like him. Go where the light is bright and the floors are clean and someone will say the words you don't want to hear. If you think you can wait, you cannot. The cut on my wrist has gone flat and shiny and it itches around the edges. I poured peroxide until the skin stung, and then I taped it shut. I keep telling myself it's only a scrape. I keep listening to the AC and telling myself that's what it is. I keep the radio on all night so the apartment hums louder than any other sound, and when I wake up at the edge of sleep with my heart beating hard, I tell myself it's the song changing. I'm gonna go to the clinic when it opens. I really am. If I'm not on here in a few days, someone call and tell them my name is in the drawer by the phone and my neighbor has a spare key. And tell them the smell is not a gas leak. Tell them to bring extra light.
Subject, final approach. User, FR33 Quentflyr. Posted, January 9th, 1999.
I used to fly a lot for work. Nothing fancy, no first-class upgrades or champagne toasts. Just connecting flights, middle seats, and lukewarm coffee in paper cups with the airline's logo peeling off the side. It's the kind of travel that leaves your back aching and your patience thin. This particular trip had been rough. Long days in a windowless conference room, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, pushing a product I barely believed in to a team that didn't want it. By the time I made it to the airport, I felt like I'd been scraped out and filled with concrete. The gate was crowded, one of those fully booked flights where everyone's miserable but pretending not to. I barely remember boarding. I found my seat, window side, just behind the wing, settled in, nodded at the guy in the aisle seat, and buckled up. Routine. We took off without issue. I flipped through the in-flight magazine, ignored the drink cart when it rolled by, and leaned my head against the wall. I remember watching the lights of the city vanish beneath thick cloud cover. Then I must have fallen asleep. I didn't dream, at least not that I recall. Just a blank nothingness, the kind of blackout sleep that hits you when you've been stretched too thin for too long. And when I opened my eyes again, the plane was silent. Not quiet, silent. Not the soft hum of people dozing off or flipping through paperbacks. Not the rustle of a candy wrapper or a seatbelt click. Just total, airless silence. The man beside me was gone. So was everyone else. The cabin stretched out ahead and behind like a still image. Every seat was empty. Armrests lowered, seatbelts coiled neatly across cushions, no bags in the overhead bins, no jackets or forgotten newspapers, just me. I stood up slowly, feeling the stiffness in my joints. Heart beginning to hammer against my ribs. I looked down the aisle and called out, "Hello?" My voice didn't echo. Didn't bounce or carry, it just disappeared like sound had nowhere to go. I moved toward the back of the aircraft, passing row after row of nothing. The rear galley was pristine. No carts, no plastic cups, no sign that anything had ever been prepared there. I checked the lavatories, the lights off, doors open, empty. The only thing out of place was me. I turned around and made my way back toward the front, a little faster now. I hit the call button above my seat. It lit up, but no one came. I hit it again. Still, nothing. I paused at a window and lifted the shade, and what I saw outside made my stomach drop. It was black. Not nighttime black, not the navy blue of cloud cover or the faint orange of city light bleeding through the atmosphere. It was void, an absence of anything. No stars, no moon, no blinking wing lights, just pure, featureless black stretching endlessly in every direction. Panic started to crawl up my spine as I approached the cockpit door. I pounded on it with both fists. "Hey, is anyone in there?" I shouted, voice cracking. I tried the handle. It was locked. I kicked it, hands shaking, yelled again. And then, without warning, I heard a soft click. The door swung open, slow and silent. But what lay beyond it was not a cockpit. There were no instruments, no chairs, no panels, no gauges, no pilots, just color. Endless, shifting color, like someone had torn a hole through the front of the plane and behind it was some kind of living kaleidoscope. Reds bled into greens, deep violets folded into pulsing yellows, electric blue strands spiraled through them all like veins in a body. It wasn't light, not in the normal sense. It felt like something, like pressure or static, like something old and thinking was looking back through it. sound began to hum deep in my ears. Not a voice, not music, just a vibration, low and steady, like machinery running far away or a memory you couldn't quite reach. I stepped forward, one foot still inside the cabin, the other just past the threshold. It didn't feel like I was moving under my own power. It felt like I was being pulled, gently but firmly, toward something waiting inside. My arm rose without thinking, reaching into that light. My skin tingled like it was being brushed with static. The air had weight. Time felt elastic. I knew if I stepped forward, I wouldn't come back. And then I blinked. I was back in my seat, upright, belted in. The man next to me was reading a newspaper, licking his thumb every few pages. Across the aisle, a kid was digging through a snack bag while his mom napped. A voice crackled over the speaker above me. Ladies and gentlemen, we've begun our descent. Please return your seats and tray tables to their upright positions. Everything was normal. Perfectly, eerily normal. I didn't move, just slowly turned my head and looked out the window. The void was gone, and in its place was the gentle glow of streetlights, the twinkling scatter of distant suburbs, and the silver ribbon of a river winding beneath us. But just before we broke through the final layer of clouds, I saw it again. Just a second, a flicker, a shimmer of unnatural color far off in the dark. The same shades, the same pattern, and then it vanished. We touched down smooth. The man beside me stretched and gave me a little nod, like we'd been flying together the whole time. I grabbed my bag and walked out without saying a word.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.